Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
My favorite thing about Shipt since I signed up for Target Circle 360? No price markups when I order same-day delivery from tons of local stores. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. I won't lie, I've had too much fun being like, markups on groceries? Not in my fridge. Markups on pet food? Not for my DOG. Markups on tools, electronics, home goods, meds? Not in my house. Anyway, it's awesome. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is a true crime podcast where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen, I promise. You just have to be a true crime enthusiast, and if that's you, welcome home. All right, today's case continues to highlight the October theme that I had going on at the end of the month, which is domestic abuse and domestic violence. I understand it's no longer October, but guess what? This issue continues outside of the month of October. This week, I am going to tell you about 22-year-old Cati Boyter. She was a young girl who seemed to have gotten away from her abusive husband, who was an active duty Army soldier by the name of John. When just months after she left him, she seemingly vanished. Join me today as we discuss Cati Boyter and her fugitive husband, John Blauvelt. Now, let's dig in. My sources for this episode include articles, audio, and videos by Crime Watch Daily, In Pursuit of Justice with John Walsh on Investigation Discovery, the Murder Squad podcast, Fox Carolina, and Greenville Online. I also had the privilege to gather insight into today's story from Cati Boyter's niece, Chyanne Paxton, who took time out of her busy day to chat with me. The year was 2015, and Catherine Boyter, who went by Cati, was 21 years old, and she had been working at the Firehouse shop in Simpsonville, South Carolina for quite some time. Cati joined her niece at Firehouse after working at the local Hardee's for some time. Cati was doing great. She was working and she was taking college classes at Greenville Tech. While she hadn't settled on a major yet, her niece Chyanne believes that Cati would have done something with animals because Cati loved animals. The sub shop was located in a little shopping strip with a Mexican restaurant, a jewelry store, the Simpsonville Army recruiting station, and an AT&T on the corner. At lunchtime, some of the Army recruiters would visit the shop, and one of the recruiters caught Cati's attention, a 28-year-old staff sergeant by the name of John Blauvelt. John was a smooth talker, and the two got to chatting, and Cati was really interested in John. But there was just one little snafu. He was married, and he had a young daughter as well. That was a big no-no for everyone who knew Cati, but John assured her that he and his wife had a falling out, and they were going through a divorce. So even though they were living together, John and his wife, he said the divorce was coming soon. Cati's close friends and family did not like the idea of John because he was still married. Cati came from a military background. Her mom's husband was military, her grandfather was prior military, and a few of her uncles had served as well. And her mom, Patricia Pivers, was not too fond of John. But John kept his word, and within months of meeting Cati, his divorce was initiated and eventually went final. According to Chyanne, Cati's niece, it was during this courting period that John had convinced Cati to join the Army. But since they were low-key dating, he didn't serve as her recruiter per se. She went to a nearby town's recruiter and enlisted in the Army, and she was soon shipped off to boot camp. However, while at boot camp, one of Cati's childhood ailments, a back problem that didn't seem significant and she had actually never gotten checked out, seemed to flare up. Apparently, Cati had a curve in her spine that made exercising difficult or painful. Well, according to Chyanne, it wasn't long before Cati was discharged from the military, and she found herself back in Simpsonville, South Carolina. But the short military stint didn't stop Cati and John from seeing each other. According to Chyanne, John was able to sneak into the Army boot camp area to have time with Cati while she was still in boot camp, which I thought was nuts. Anyway, after Cati got back home, the relationship moved rather quickly, and within 2 months in December of 2015, while randomly text messaging with her mom, Cati blurted out that she and John had eloped earlier that day. Gulp. Her mother thought. First, she looked at the calendar and realized it was Pearl Harbor Day, and she thought, out of all the days to get married, you chose Pearl Harbor Day? But secretly, Patricia just did not like John. There was something about him that just didn't click for her. Call it mother's intuition or something else. She just thought he wasn't the typical military man. Maybe he just seemed all over the place, disheveled, not what she came to know from the military men in her life. The couple was already living in a 4-bedroom house, which was way too much space for 2 people. But the couple wouldn't be living alone. According to Chyanne, she moved in with the couple almost immediately. She was a teenager at the time, and she was rebellious, and against Cati's advice, the teen wanted to leave home. So Cati happily took her in. Cati was Cheyenne's aunt, but she was only 4 years older than her, so they were more like sisters. In fact, Chyanne told me that they would say that they were soulmates because they were so alike. The couple shared one room. Chyanne stayed in one room. One room was reserved for John's daughter when she visited, and the other room was converted into a game room. But it wouldn't be a quiet house to live in. In fact, it turned into a party house, and interestingly, right across the street from the Blauvelt house was a trap house. Now listen, I had no idea what a trap house was until Chyanne educated me. She told me that a trap house is a house where drugs are sold out of. Like, the whole purpose of the house is to sell drugs. And well, this actually, the trap house, became a place that John frequented, but not only to get marijuana, also to get acid, to get mushrooms, and a slew of other drugs. Now, John was an Army recruiter, so he often set up shop at the local high school, which I discovered by stalking his old Instagram account. These high schools were Hillcrest High School, Lawrence District 55 High, and Malden High. Anyway, we all know that youngins nowadays need encouragement to join the military. It's not like before where parents are basically like college or the military. So John felt that he needed an edge to get these kids to sign the dotted line. And he got that by providing alcohol and drugs to minors. And now that he had this large house, that's what he decided to do. He decided to throw these ragers. Cati was not too keen on these parties. She told him to cut it out, but John was a terrible drunk, and he'd always tell her to mind her dang business. Now, Chyanne describes that John and Cati had a particularly volatile relationship. They were always arguing. In fact, Chyanne found it hard to remember when they actually weren't fighting. And John was a violent drunk, punching car windows and shattering them, and always causing a scene outside of the house. After one particularly big fight between the couple, Cati had enough and she moved out.
You want the best for your vision, and that starts with where you go. Essilor experts are independent eye care professionals who will listen carefully to your vision preferences and recommend Essilor lenses with the latest technologies to correct and protect your eyes. Find your local Essilor expert at Essilor.com.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Are you looking for your next case? Pluto TV has all your favorite crime dramas streaming for free, which means suspicion is free, with countless cases to crack. Watch CSI, Criminal Minds, NCIS, Blue Bloods, Tracker, FBI, and SWAT, all for free from all your favorite devices. Feel the free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Well, in February of 2016, during one of John's drug and alcohol-fueled parties, Chyanne's dad and another teen's dad were upset because they could not control their daughters. One of the teens was 17-year-old Hannah. Well, the dads went down to the police station to report the house party. The police showed up at the Blauvelt house during this particular party in February, and they start knocking, but John tells everyone to stop talking and lock the doors. John had no intention of letting the cops in. The cops were rightfully pissed because have you ever sat outside of a room or a house where people are trying to be quiet, but there's so many of them inside that you can just tell that there's people inside? Well, the cops were walking around the house trying to make entry, but couldn't. So they were forced to get a search warrant, and it was an 8-hour standoff, according to Chyanne. And well, during that time, 2 teens finally decided to leave the house, and they all walked out one by one. And the police outside ended up putting the, quote, red dots, end quote, on John, and that's when he was finally apprehended. When Cati learned about what happened, Cati went down to the police station with a story of her own. She turned over a revolver that she indicated John used to threaten her. She told them about the marital hell that she had been living in, and she told a shocking story. In late January of 2016, just a few weeks before this house party, John had pointed a gun at Cati. I was able to see some of the report, and it appears that in January of 2016, John wanted to know who Cati had been texting. When she failed to reveal the messages, John and Cati began to argue, and it quickly escalated because John grabbed his revolver and pointed it at Cati, threatening to use it. He told her to unlock the phone, but she refused. Seeing no response from Cati, he then turned the gun on himself and threatened to kill himself. He then grabbed a different gun and fled the house, threatening to kill everyone Cati knew. Cati appears to have been living under John's thumb since that incident, even though she had already moved out and was living with her mom during the February 2016 party. And it wasn't until the cops busted the underage party that Cati finally revealed what happened. So, John was charged with various counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, as well as domestic violence. But almost as soon as John went to jail, he made bond, but he was warned not to go near Cati. Interestingly, while John was in jail, Cati took that opportunity to move back into the marital home because she felt, this is my home too. John, according to Chyanne, was not too keen on this, and when Cati refused to let him come over to grab his things, he parked nearby and attempted to enter the home through a window. Chyanne does not recall what ended up happening that time, but she knew this incident to be true because she was in the car with John. Now, I should point out that Chyanne did share with me that although her and Cati were besties, in fact, soulmates, they also went through a rough patch, particularly when Chyanne was being rebellious, and Cati tried to warn Chyanne that life was not all about drinking, drugs, and friends. But in typical teenage fashion, Chyanne would hear none of it. Eventually, Cati moved out of the house because she was not able to afford all the bills without John's help. While almost every single newspaper reported that Cati filed for divorce, Chyanne shared with me that Cati did go see a lawyer briefly, but she never actually filed for divorce. After Cati left the house and was no longer living with John, Cati got wind that John was a 2-timing SOB, which is interesting because she already knew that. But she found out this time because remember that 17-year-old named Hannah? Well, now that Cati was out of the picture, it seemed that John and Hannah were now a thing. While most news reports about this case make it seem that John and Cati did not have communications for 8 months after the February house party ordeal, that is actually far from the truth. According to Chyanne, John and Cati never really stopped talking. John always managed to get back into Cati's life, and Chyanne even told me that they would occasionally even hang out. Cati and John, that is, between the time of February to October. By this point, Cati is now working at the local PetSmart, and it appears that Cati is getting kind of close to another young man. Cati and her close guy friend end up hanging out with Chyanne and her boyfriend. And Chyanne told me about this old abandoned house in town. It was actually right behind the local high school, but it was surrounded by all these trees. Like, she actually describes it to me as a house in the forest, but the forest isn't too far away from civilization. Chyanne's friends found it in the 7th grade, and the young kids would go out there to get themselves into trouble. But they thought it was a great hiding place, and they loved it, even though it sounds kind of spooky. Well, as this group of kids got older, they actually decided to clean up this abandoned house. And it was like this particular group of kids, it was like their hangout spot. Chyanne recalls that about a week or two before everything went down, Chyanne, Cati, and their dudes went out there to this abandoned house to smoke. Well, on October 24th at about 3 p.m., Cati was leaving her job at PetSmart, and her niece Chyanne called to see about them grabbing dinner. Cati sounded off, like she wasn't all there, and told her niece that she was just driving around, that she might catch up with her later. Later came and went, and Cati's family phoned and phoned and phoned, and no answer. Chyanne even called John and Hannah to see if they had heard from Cati, but no one answered. The very next morning, when Cati's phone calls went unanswered and she failed to return to her mom's house, Cati's mom reported her missing. At first, Chyanne was sure everyone was overreacting, but then the tone in the family changed. Even though Cati hadn't been missing for 24 hours, Cati's family and friends didn't just wait for the cops. They went to search for Cati. Chyanne met up with John, and he told her that she could borrow his car to go search for Cati. But when Chyanne showed up, the car had a flat tire, so they ended up all staying put and smoking. However, they did have this GPS tracker type thing on Cati's phone, and they tracked it to a house close to the abandoned house, but it was some guy's house, I guess, some old gentleman's house. So Chyanne got out of the car to go ask this guy some questions, and she thought it was odd that John also got out of the car. But I guess when they asked the guy if he had seen or heard from Cati, he said he hadn't seen or heard anything. So after that, they all just went back to John's house and smoked and drank some more. Well, that night, Chyanne got a call from a friend asking her where she was. And she was kind of in a pissy mood, so they didn't talk too long. But the friend seemed concerned, which raised suspicions for Chyanne. Chyanne ended up leaving her boyfriend at John's house and asking some of her family to come pick her up. And as soon as her family picked her up, they peppered her with questions about the abandoned house. They told her that the house was surrounded by police and they felt something terrible had happened there. Just then, memories of a drunk John flushed into Cheyenne's head. She recalls on multiple times when John was in a drunk, high stupor. He would say how he was going to kill Cati and leave her in the basement of the abandoned house. Now, the kiddos around John were never concerned, but, Chyanne heard it, and the first time she heard it, she told Cati what John said. But Chyanne recalls that after she told Cati asked John, what the hell are you saying? And it really only just caused a bigger fight. But Chyanne never thought that John would actually go through with it. Well, the next morning, now over 24 hours since Cati had been seen or heard from, the family received devastating news. Cati had been murdered and found in the basement of the abandoned house. Yup, she had been stabbed. Her body was discovered by one of her friends laying under a pile of lumber that seemed out of place. And when I read these articles, I always wondered, I was like, how does a pile of lumber in an abandoned house seem out of place? And it totally makes sense now because these kids had partied just even a few days or a week before they found her there, and the pile of lumber was not there before. An investigation quickly ensued, and without any concrete evidence of who killed Cati, John was notified that Cati was murdered since he was her next of kin. But the chilling part for investigators was when they went to his house to tell him that his wife was dead, and he was just calm and cool as a cucumber. But it would be another few weeks before cops moved in on John and received a proper warrant. According to Chyanne, it took that long because investigators were waiting on DNA evidence, and when police felt that they had enough, the police showed up to John's doorstep on November 18th, 2016. They had an arrest warrant, but John Blauvelt was nowhere to be found. He was MIA, or more accurately, AWOL.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
He fled in his red 2000 Yukon GMC. Katie's car, a black 2011 Ford Fiesta, was found miles away on Whitehorse Road, miles from where her remains were discovered. And even more shocking, John wasn't gone alone. He took his 17-year-old girlfriend, and at this point, police were not sure if Hannah was a victim or a willing participant. What was super odd was that when Hannah's parents checked their mailbox, they found Hannah's cell phone, but it had been wiped clean. Hannah's mom pled with the public to help them bring her daughter home. And 7 weeks after Hannah left with John, she called her parents from a Eugene, Oregon phone and told her mom she wanted to come back home. Of course, when she was picked up, she was taken by the police to be interviewed about John and the preceding 7 weeks. And all we know is that Hannah told 2 versions of events. Hannah and John spent the last few weeks living on the land. They were camping in parks and homeless shelters, and at some point they had some car troubles, but they basically made their way all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. The first version that Hannah told was that she went to sleep one night, and when she woke up, John was gone. And her second version was that one day, John went to the bathroom and he never came back. According to Chyanne, after Hannah returned back to South Carolina, she showed the police where Katie's personal belongings were: her car keys, her wallet, and her cell phone. They were all hidden in the abandoned house, and they hadn't been found by the police. Hannah, however, had never been implicated in Katie's murder. When Hannah returned back to South Carolina, she tried to be friends with that group of people again, and she even tried to befriend Chyanne again, but Chyanne would have none of it. Unfortunately, there has not been any further progress in finding John Blauvelt since he went on the run in late 2016. It's been 4 years since Katie was murdered, and John, the only suspect in her case, is still on the run. Interestingly, there did appear to be some headway in the case in March of 2020, when a man by the name of Charles Sidney Scott Jr. was charged with Katie's murder. Now, it's not clear from the news reports what Charles's connection was to the case, besides that he was an old Army buddy of John's. Now, Charles, however, ended up pleading guilty to lesser charges, including obstruction of justice. Due to his guilty plea, the murder charge and the possession of a deadly weapon charge were dropped. News reports indicate that Charles was sentenced to time served and was released from jail a week after he pled guilty. It's unclear to me if Charles was in jail from late 2016 until early 2020, but that may have something to do with why he was sentenced to time served. Fox Carolina reported that Charles was originally arrested in 2016. And they also reported that a spokeswoman for the South Carolina Attorney General's office confirmed that, quote, evidence does not support that Charles was involved in the murder, which is why the murder and weapons charges were dropped, end quote. Chyanne shared with me that her family was interviewed on 3 separate occasions leading up to Charles's case. And while they are bummed nothing came of the charges against Charles, she knows who really killed Katie. Apparently, before Katie died, John's mother contacted Katie to tell her to be careful around John because he was crazy and capable of a lot of things. And I know that may sound shocking to many. Why would John's mom say that about her own son? But according to Chyanne, John loathed his mom. Well, if John's mom actually made that statement, she clearly wasn't wrong, and she knew her son better than anyone else. Now, 4 years later, Katie's family and friends and law enforcement still need your help in finding John Blauvelt and bringing him to justice for taking Katie at just 22 years old. Clearly, John is capable of hiding in plain sight, and he will never be brought to justice without your help. John was born on September 8th, 1988. He's currently 32 years old. He's between 5 feet 6 inches tall and 5 feet 8 inches tall. When he went into hiding, he weighed about 180 pounds. He has a few tattoos, including the name Madison on his left wrist, a pirate, a rose, and a sunset on his right arm, a yin-yang symbol on his left forearm, and a parrot on the right side of his chest. Now, it's possible he may have gotten more tattoos since going on the run, and it's even possible he may have gotten some removed. When he disappeared 4 years ago, he was driving a red 2000 GMC Yukon with South Carolina license plate number JKY826. It is believed that when he went on the run, he spray painted the car a different color, maybe gray or black or something like that. Chyanne told me that this particular vehicle was found sometime after Katie was murdered. It was found completely abandoned in the deep woods somewhere on the West Coast. John has been known to use aliases such as Blue Blauvelt, John Bluefield, Vincent Mendoza, and Vincent Sacchetti. The search for John involves various agencies, including the Simpsonville Police Department and the U.S. Marshals. I'm not 100% sure, but I bet Army CID has an open case as well. All right, anyone with information on this case, or more specifically, anyone with information on John's whereabouts, please contact the Simpsonville PD at 864-967-9535. Or you can even submit an anonymous tip online at p3tips.com. John Blauvelt is considered armed and extremely dangerous, so please do not try to be a hero if you see him in the street. Please contact law enforcement ASAP and try to remember as many specifics as possible. This is one of those episodes that I need you to share on all of your social media accounts. I need you to share with your friends, with your family. John may actually be under our very noses, especially now during COVID when we are all wearing masks. Remember, he has a connection to the Army as an Army recruiter. He's very likable and very manipulative, okay? Now, before I leave you today, I wanted to leave you with a message from Chyanne.
Pay attention and find him and share the story, even though it just seems like, why am I sharing those? You know, when you share it and it gets out there, you got to think what if that was your sister or your niece or your best friend, just met this guy and she's not really telling anybody about them. That could be John, and he knows how to manipulate. He does, and he's very good at it. He knows how to weasel his way into any situation. And so you got to think about it you don't want this guy out there. You don't want him coming into contact with anybody you love. And the more that it gets, the more that his face gets out there, the more that, he gets put on TV shows like the John Walsh Show, and the more he gets on podcasts and things like this, the more people look for him, and the bigger the possibility that they can catch him and not only get justice for Katie, but also, save other women and anybody who he could be putting in danger right now, because he's not alone wherever he is.
I want to thank Chyanne for chatting with me. She's a busy mother of two, and I just want to say thank you so much. We actually ended up speaking the day after the 4-year anniversary of Katie's murder, and Chyanne had a really, really rough time just remembering her aunt. And the reason why she wanted to chat with me is because Katie's family wants to continue to share Katie's story. They're afraid that as time goes by, people will just forget about Katie and justice will go unserved. But you know what? We here at the True Crime Army, we are not going to let that happen, right, True Crime Army? All right, so I'm going to be posting my interview with Chyanne in the Military Murder Fan Club. So if you're interested in hearing all of the details, make sure that you check out the fan club at patreon.com/militarymurder. And just remember, for as little as $5 a month, you can support this independent podcast. Now, make sure that you're following me on social media so that you can see these pictures of John that I'm going to be posting. You can find me on social on Instagram at Military Murder Podcast and on Facebook at Military True Crime. And like I said, share his picture. I need to take a minute to acknowledge all of my new fan club members. First, thank you to my newest dotted line supporter, Jarre. I think that's right, Jarre P. Now, this show was created by Mama Margot Productions and produced in collaboration with my boot camp and higher fan club members. Now, shout out to this week's newest assistant producers, Katie K and Emily W. And as always, the music was created by Tyops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next week.
Let's work on our podcast.